A very big, warm welcome to Business Today's India at 100 Economy Summit. As India celebrates and reflects on its achievements on 75 years of independence, it is time to take forward the trajectory of India's phenomenal growth story. Create the right policies and introduce the right levers to achieve greater heights. To chart the growth path of the next 25 years and achieve global leadership position for the Indian economy.
We in India had an airline even prior to independence, right? And you had airlines in the Deccan. You had Air India that was operating 5 to 7 years even prior to independence. Operated on multiple trunk routes as well as domestic routes. So it would be fair to say that aviation has been part of our DNA for a very, very long time. We had seaplanes in India in the 1910s, 1920s. We had a seaplane landing in a man-made lake in Gwalior way back in 1910, 1920. So civil aviation has been very much part of our DNA for a very, very long time. But the question very aptly asked today is, from Amrit Kal to Shatabdi Kal, the journey of India in the area of civil aviation. Today, in a span of 8 years, we have built out an additional 67 airports, water ports and heliports. So we've gone from a number of 74 to 141. We have almost doubled our number of airports, water ports and heliports in India. And the reason why that's happening is really simple. You have a country of 1.3 billion people. But pre-pandemic, we had only 144 million flyers in India. So the delta between civil aviation and railways is roughly about 40 million travelers per year. However, the important point here is if you look at the CAGR, the compounded annual growth rate, the CAGR for railways is close to about 5.6%, whereas the CAGR for civil aviation is close to 10.3%. So therefore, it's my prediction that in the years to come, it may take us another 5 years, 7 years, but in the years to come, you're actually going to look at the number of travelers in civil aviation becoming pretty much the bulwark of air-conditioned travel in India as a means of transportation. Pre-pandemic, we had, as I mentioned, 144 million domestic travelers and 60 million international travelers. What's my forecast? My forecast is in the next 5 to 7 years, that number of 200 million is going to grow to 400 million travelers. That's the kind of delta in growth that you're going to see in the civil aviation business.
The whole idea of this conference is India at 100. In the initial part, because of the immediacy of 5G, we got caught up in what's happening now. But what's your view on how the telecom sector and the IT sector is going to evolve over the next 2.5 decades? What are the other meta trends that you are preparing for, right?
Well, I think we are into a very, very exciting phase. And I feel that somehow everything has aligned in a very good way for India. Building hard physical infrastructure would still take us 20, 30 years to be where China is. You know, while we are doing road development at breakneck speed, we are doing, new airports, a lot of new stuff is coming through. But that takes time. It's really not an easy task to put infrastructure for a nation as big and diverse as India. There are issues on forests being, not allowed to be exploited for infrastructure, bridges, flyovers. So there's a lot of work to be done. There will keep on happening. But the digital infrastructure is here and now. And I think that is where India's vision of being digital holds so much promise. We are about $3.1 trillion economy today. We are wanting to get to $5 trillion economy by 2027, of which $1 trillion is being actually projected for digital, which means the country, the leadership, the government recognizes that a digital platform for India will transform this nation. And if you really see the Jam Trinity, the Jandhan, the Aadhaar, the mobile in everybody's hand, has transformed. Just imagine a life without connectivity today, without a mobile phone. Look what happened in pandemic. not a single hour was lost in productivity. Traffic shifted from cities to rural India. Traffic shifted from offices to home. Did you ever miss a single beat? Yes, everything was seamless. And for that, not just Airtel, every other telecom operator should be given credit. Everybody worked day and night. People were out in the street moving the traffic, regardless of the fear or dangers of COVID onto them and their families.
Everyone watching you on all of our platforms of Business Today and India Today would be keen on knowing if 5G हमारा कब आ रहा है? When does my phone go from the current 4G service that it has to a 5G? How soon do we start? And what does this mean to everyone who's listening to you at this moment?
Well, I think 5G is now, as we all know, around the corner. We are in almost full readiness, I would say. And if you really look at the world, 5G has now started to take roots, real roots in most of the Western world, Southeast Asian countries. Singapore, in fact, was the last one to go and start its 5G. So I think some people think India is late. India is not late. In fact, it's the perfect timing. Some use cases are being developed. You can see devices coming through, prices of devices started to fall down, which perfectly suits a country like India. So I think we are ready. Thankfully, this time, the government put up a lot of spectrum because 5G requires very large chunks of spectrum.
Many of the telecom pioneers, the private sector pioneers in India started off with manufacturing. Bharti with phones, Mr. Mittal also did gensets, others did phones and a lot of equipment. Ericsson still does a lot of equipment out of India. What's the goal for Atmanirbharta in telecom? Obviously, the security reasons are understood by everyone, the China factor. What is your own sense about how Atmanirbhar will India be when it comes to electronics, IT and telecom sector?
Very, very important question. I'm glad that you asked it. 2014. If you look at that period, we had hardly any electronics manufacturing. Forget telecom equipment, forget cell phones. It was not even thinkable. People were not even considering that India will ever become a player. What is the electronics manufacturing today? Close to 80 billion US. Close to 80 billion US. What is the number of people employed in the electronics manufacturing sector? Close to 2.5 million people employed in electronics manufacturing. What is the rate of growth of this industry, electronics manufacturing in India? Double-digit CAGR. And we think that in next 4 years, 5 years, this will become a 250 billion. Industry thinks that this might actually exceed 300 billion. It might actually exceed 1 crore employment in the coming 4 to 5 years. That is the growth story. And we should not just stop at that. We are now tweaking our policies to have more and more IP getting into those products. Not just manufacturing, but design also. And I'm very happy to share with the audience through you that today we just closed the applications for the design-led incentive scheme for telecom equipment. We have received 32 applications. I mean, imagine 32 companies willing to put their investment in India, not just for manufacturing, but putting their design efforts, putting their design teams. And it's not just for telecom equipment manufacturing, right? The entire spectrum end to end, right from semiconductors to the components, to the ESM assembly work, to the final thing, to the final product. And once the USO fund gets transformed into a slightly larger piece, we will also be looking at the software side of it. Why shouldn't India aspire to have its own operating system for mobile phones, right? Those are the things that we have to aspire, and we lost out the race in 2G and 3G because of various reasons, and mostly the political will was not there. 4G, we caught up. 5G, we should be able to stand up with the world. But 6G, Prime Minister has given us the clear mandate. We should become the leaders in the world.